Hey guys, it's Jalen here from Team Burning Infinity, doing Legend World. Oh man, I'm just gonna get comfortable because I'm gonna be a little annoyed with this. Anyway, I'm not fond of Legend World's Knights at the Round Table, or Legend World for that matter. I think all of them are bad in their own special way. But that's me being biased, and my opinion on the deck. But here is cold hard facts about the deck, so none of my biased bullshit. There's going to be a little bit of it, or maybe a lot, but it won't disrupt the verdict, because these are based on the facts of the deck. But nonetheless, of my onward rant about how I feel about this deck, let me show you the pros and the cons of this deck. Alright, pro. The deck has a decent damage output. Better in late game, though. Now, the late game is so much better because of Excalibur having 3 critical, 10,000 power, and it's not so hard a requirement when it comes to having 10 or more heroes in the drop zone when it's late game, of course. And discarding a Holy Grail can be easy once you use a Gareth's ability. It's decent all around when it's the beginning, because you do have a 3 crit weapon such as Runting, you have 2 crit weapons such as Balmung, you have a 1 crit decent one like Durandal with 6,000 power though, and then you've got all the monsters having 2 critical except for Percival, who has 3 critical, so they were pretty nice distribution of crit. They don't have anything of 1 crit or below, so they've got a pretty good amount of just critical going for them. And the weapons definitely do help. But a con of the deck, as I mentioned, is that the deck is better late game than it is early game, which can help. This doesn't help when they're being pressured. Now, they're only better in late game because they don't really sustain themselves, and that's due to another con I'm going to talk about. But they aren't good at sustaining themselves in the early game, so pretty much when they start setting up for Excalibur, and when they start getting a little damage in there, if your opponent's a bit unlucky, then you can start applying some pressure that helps. But other than that, this deck doesn't have anything going for it, because Merlin is a very useful card, but it's not going to sustain the deck itself, because they have another con I'm going to talk about. Monster Troubles. Now, what I mean by monster troubles is this deck needs monsters to start getting your fuel going, but there's no way to get any monsters to your hand. This is the problem with most decks, but this deck relies on it a lot. About 3/4 of your monsters do require link attacks for their shit to work. And then another card would be like Merlin. Yeah, he can discard any card of a hero attribute, which helps, but it could also be a hero monster. You don't want to discard a hero monster, and then the spells are useful. Most of the time, you don't want to discard really anything with Merlin's ability, until you get the Valkyrie size 0, which allows you to basically gain a gauge and draw a card. This is so great because this will allow Merlin to basically get back the card you lost in your hand from the discard, and the gauge that you used for his ability, and you still get the 2 cards in hand. The hero attribute spells, or the items, no monsters, the rest go in the bottom. Anyway, another good pro about the deck is the hero acquitted cards, which is the deck itself in some ways. But it's primarily about 5 cards. You've got Arthur, Knights of the Round Table Arthur, Knights of the Round Table Gawain, Knights of the Round Table Gareth, Merlin, and you have Excalibur. All these cards are the ones that actually use, well, the abilities and shit based on their deck. If you want to count Heroic Spirit, go ahead. It's a Dragon Energy clone. I don't really count it. But Excalibur I've already explained. Merlin, his ability being a Shiden, kinda, but instead you only get specifically spells and items. You do give information to your opponent, but it's a really decent card. 2,000 power is pretty shitty though. I mean, pretty decent in some ways, but it's really shitty. 2 critical, pretty decent, and then 1,000 defense being pretty awful, of course. Then you have Gawain, which is 3/2/1, and then he has Penetrate if you link attack with a Knights of the Round Table. Then you have Arthur, who pays 1 gauge, he's 4/2/5, and he has the same thing as Gawain, but also he gains a gauge when he link attacks with a of a Knight of the Round Table. And then Gareth, who, when he link attacks with a Knight of the Round Table, then you pay 3 gauge, and then you gain a Holy Grail from your drop zone into your hand. Really great to get back your Nullifier. So all these cards really do work well with the hero attribute, Merlin especially, because that's all he can do. But this deck really does work pretty decently with the hero attribute. At least it does more if it's attribute more than the other decks in Legend World do. Even the weapons also work. Speaking of the weapons themselves are a pro. Now, each one of the weapons do have their own great role. You have Runting, which is just a basic 3 crit card. It's 1,000 power, is nothing to be special about. It's weak. But then you have a card that makes up for its power, because then you have Durandal, it's 6,000 power, but then it has 1 critical. But then Runting makes up for the critical. And then you have Equipment Change, so you can interchange between these. Then you have Pridwin, which I believe is an awful card, but people like it because counter and Equipment Change is a really great thing to have, because it can help you avoid item destruction. If you counter Equipment Change, then use the ability before you are, and you have to do this all in motion. Before you attack, you go for the ability, then you, being attacked, say, directly, you go for the ability, and you can still go for a counter in that motion, and then you can go for a Shield of Achilles and say, 4 critical link attack or 4 critical monster would only do no damage, because with both of them stacked up, it would reduce both the damage by 4. So this is a pretty good card. Then you got Balmung, where it's decent power, I guess, decent to critical, and it also destroys all dragon attribute monsters on command. So they've got really, really good Equipment Change cards that help their deck. Then you could even run Sylph to get them back from the drop zone. So this deck really works really well with the weapons. Now, another con of the deck, the stats are awful. Okay, listen to this. They have 2 size 2s, that's being Percival and Arthur. Percival has decent stats, 5,000 power, 3 critical, 3,000 defense, and Arthur has 425. 425, they pay a gauge to call. But then you have Heroic Spirit. It's a Dragon Energy clone, exact Dragon Energy clone, 3/3 counterattack. But every other monster other than those 2 have 1,000 defense. So they can't even abuse this unless a person uses a super weenie monster to attack them, and then you can Dragon Energy clone them. Cool. But you used it on a monster that's most likely not going to live because they have such weak defense after the counterattack and shit has gone on. And, in the game, the only card to truly abuse that with is Arthur, because he has 5,000 defense, so they'll need a 6,000 or 5,000 monster, and then you can Dragon Energy that, punishing them. But you can't do that with any other monster. Percival, maybe, but Percival's got not enough defense to sustain that. 6,000? The only monsters that would get hit by that are 5,000 or less. That's a pretty decent amount of monsters, but most things have a 6k threshold now, so that's not going to work as well. I don't like that. I don't like a Dragon Energy clone being useless in a deck. They have pretty bad stats. They don't have anything above 6k power, so they struggle with link attacks. If it wasn't for the Penetrate on Arthur and Gawain, they would pretty much be walled by Seeger, along with not having Balmung if they didn't have that either, or Durandal for power. All these cards just help out the deck's few issues, but oh my god, it's so bad in terms of that. But another pro of the deck is they do have good draw power, at least as of Perfect Pack. They do have pretty good draw power now. With Symbol Guard, you can have a Life Break 6 nice one, and if you do have a Brethren Guard in the drop zone, then you can not pay to gauge. You can draw 2. So that's pretty great. Pretty great for the deck. Allows them to get pretty easy draw power within a Life Break of 6. That's a nice number. And then the Valkyrie allowing them to gain a gauge and draw if you discard from Merlin's ability. So, really good cards that can help out the deck. And I believe the last pro of this deck would most likely be their advantage?
Yeah.
I don't know how to word this. Pretty much they can gain a lot. They can gain a good amount of advantage to the point where even if your monsters start dying, you probably already whittle away your opponent's just life, and Excalibur is their best way to win in a late game situation. So they do have enough, I would say, advantage to sustain themselves to the point where they can close out a win. especially with a card like Breathing Guard allowing them to close out the win by basically stopping any spell attack nullifiers by nullifying it because it's a spell. But now we're getting onto the cons of the deck, the last few. The deck can't deal with pressure. Their nullifiers are so scarce, it's bad. They have a Battle or Circle Clone, definitely a good one, but nothing special. Then you have Shalsonic Clone that doesn't gain you a life, but it costs you an extra gauge, and it has good other abilities, but you mainly use it for the nullifiers, so and it has no synergy, so you can't get it with Merlin, so it would just go to the bottom of your deck if you got it, so that would be pretty awful. Then you have Shield of Achilles, which is a white dragon shield. Fuck that. You know how I feel about those. And then you have Pridwin, which is 2 gauge white dragon shield. Why? Why does that exist? Why? Either way, I don't like their nullifier lineup. It's better than Danger Worlds, but oh my god, it's still just as bad. I don't like it. It doesn't allow them to sustain up, and they don't have anything to defend themselves with, because like I said, shit defense monsters, bad stats, they cannot sustain themselves against fucking stuff like that. They can't deal with pressure. Someone goes 3 crit, 3 crit, 3 crit, they're most likely going to have to take up 6 damage all the time, which is really bad, especially in a deck when the only gain of your life gain is like basically Buddy Gift, and if you're running it, Elixir Esculapius, so the fuck you gonna do for life? I don't understand how they just made this deck like this. I don't know. But the last con of the deck, this is my least favorite of them all. The deck has absolutely no chance without Balmung in certain matchups. And when I mean certain matchups, defensive dragon decks, or dragon decks with monsters with good defense, would fuck them up. AKA, Seeger. Seeger would rape their fucking face without that card. Without Balmung, they would pretty much be at a threshold where they're so weak that the most they can do is be able to go for the 7k with Arthur and Gawain, go for 4 crit penetrate. But they can just go Dragon Outlaw, Wrath Trigger. Well, Wrath Trigger, they would still take the damage. But it can go Dragon Outlaw, Glacies, or such cards that give counterattack and defense, like with defense, like even not Dragon Lucian wouldn't help, but just some cards, and like they can barely touch Spartan. I think they actually technically can't. They can't touch Spartan without having to have 2 Gawains and a Gawain and a Percival, or 2 Gawains and another size 1. They can't hit that number without using a Durandal too. The weapons also come to account, but look, they're monsters. Their monsters can't touch this shit. They need weapons all the time versus the Ancient World matchup. You go against Darkness Dragon World, Mabel Taker walls your deck. You go against the new Dragon World coming in set 5, General Boldness, the 738, I don't remember his name, but 738 1 gauge vanilla for Dragon World, that walls this deck. This deck can't deal with walls. It doesn't have wall breaker cards. It doesn't have any card that they don't have counter removal. Oh, there's another con of the deck. No monster removal. 0. None exists. At least Danger World got some. The Ancient World has a scarce amount, and every other deck has some way to get rid of a monster on board. This has none. 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 The only card that allows them to destroy monsters are Ragnarok and Great Spell Thunder of Zeus. Everything fucking else is like counterattack or something, and that's not guaranteed with these monsters' weak stats. So, how do they eventually deal with a monster? Oh, you're gonna have to probably link attack it, because of their weak defense and power. I gotta say, my final verdict on this deck, it's very decent. Decent at best. You can't make this your main deck of being the best shit you can ever play. You can't make this the best deck ever. You can't do anything with this deck specially. You can try and throw in Vlatarogs to deal with the gauge issue they slightly have. You can get Sylph, so you have to splash them to make... You have to splash cards in Legend Worlds to just make them workable with. They can't do anything on their own. They should be. That's how they're designed, but they're not. They can't do it because they're too weak. But nonetheless, hope you guys liked this video. Subscribe to Team Burning Infinity for more Buddy Fight content, and comment down below what you want to see me review. And that'll be an old deck, a new deck, and a deck coming out, and so on and so forth. Anyway, see you guys later. Joey going out.